We should go around and introduce, though.
Yes, we should go around and introduce. Welcome back to Opening the Vault.
That's a Mason thing to do. I love that.
That's our intro. We're back.
Yeah.
With Mason Banks and
Dylan Dilpickle Hoban on the actor side of things to
Yes.
this time.
with Coyote on a Fence. And let's start with here. Eric, well, introduce yourself. Well, actually, first we'll introduce everybody, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, say you introduce yourself and which character you're playing in the show.
My name's Eric Clark. I'm playing Bobby Rayburn.
I'm Marissa McKinney, and I'm playing Shauna Duchamps.
I'm Brian Ting, and I'm playing Samuel Freed.
Once again, I'm Dylan Dilpickle Hoban, and I will be playing John Brennan. And this is our cast. The four of us
Yeah.
make up the cast of Coyote on a Fence.
I am really happy that you guys really wanted to come on. It's actually pretty humbling. It makes me really happy.
Aw.
This is-
Anything
of
for
course,
you,
Mason.
Mason.
It's an exciting project.
Thanks, Mason. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So we'll start with you, Eric. So your character, without giving too much away, again, we don't want to give away spoilers. First of all, I haven't seen it. I know you guys have all been involved with it for some very long.
Sometime.
Sometime.
Yeah,
A little bit.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
about time.
And he picked up a straggler. Was it Dylan?
I know, gosh.
Yeah.
New kid on the block.
Snuck in
Yes.
last minute.
I know.
So for your character, without giving too much away, what was the process for delving into this character for you, for Bobby, correct?
It was a little bit difficult at first, just because he's a very easy character to portray in a lot of ways, just because he's an idiot, and idiots are usually pretty easy to portray. But he in his idiot fashion states some pretty controversial views, and you have to kind of I have to go completely to his perspective and can't put any of my views on the subject matter into the character, or else it just doesn't make any sense.
Just so you know, Eric, Jayani did disclose to our audience that
Oh.
Bobby is a neo-Nazi.
Okay, I was really trying to
She
dance.
felt that was fair.
I was
She felt that was
really
not a
trying
spoiler.
to dance around it. Okay, yeah. So being a quote unquote lovable neo-Nazi it's difficult.
Contradictory.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very contradictory in the fact that I have to make myself seem appealing to the audience, even though that's literally the least appealing person I think you can
Sure.
be, actually.
One of the.
I think it's very interesting because a lot of times villains, because we were talking about this a little bit, how a lot of times we're presented as villains as these archetypes, and then we hate them because we're like, oh, they're evil, and you can
Yeah.
see the evil. That's
Yeah.
the evil, but a lot of times they're people who have evil characteristics that you shouldn't accept necessarily. And so I guess what I'm more interested in for you is, was there something did you just analyze the text to kind of get the character? Is there a technical way that you portray it that helps you portray it? Is there something emotionally? Do you do it there's as ifs, if you say this moment with this character when he's yelling at maybe another cellmate, I don't know, and you're like, oh, it's as if this happened in my life.
Getting into the
Yeah,
subtext.
What type of process is your process, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, initially it was a lot of text analysis, just seeing what he actually is like, because he does flip a switch a lot when the subject of race or the subject of Semitism is brought up. He does switch very fast from this guy that you really want to like, and that, yeah, he's just an idiot, to somebody that has very, very hard set views that is not going to change anytime soon. So a lot of it was just trying to find the balance in between lovable idiot and somebody that's sharing those views. So, and then a lot of those were as ifs, because opening up a little bit, I grew up in a very Christian family, and those ideals were just kind of ingrained in you, from a very, very early age. And I remember getting into debates with people, but knowing that I'm never going to change my views, and just thinking, oh, well, quoting the show, you've been brainwashed. You've been brainwashed by the mainstream media and stuff like that, I know the truth and I'm going to try to tell it to you,
That's interesting.
regardless of whether or not it may or may not be actually true.
It's your truth.
It's my truth.
It's Bobby's truth.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's very interesting. A lot of times as actors, that's what we do. You find their truth and you play that, and then usually
Related to your truths. And how would you play you
Exactly.
talking about something that is your belief?
Yeah, exactly. Or even that, or the reason I asked like more technical aspects too is a lot of times if you don't have like a super close emotional attachment or anything that you feel like can relate to it, you have to do these very technical things that bring you closer to it, and they to an audience give the same appearance. What about you, Marissa or Shauna? Like, is there anything you use specifically to get into your character, or?
Well, first off,
yeah.
give a little bit about Shauna and who was she in this story, and what is she?
So, I guess the way that I would describe Shauna is she's sort of the slightly unreliable narrator. She interacts with all of the characters, minimally everyone except for John, but the main part that she plays is through the monologues that she has with an imaginary reporter. And I think that in itself was an interesting process for me because usually I have a scene partner, and I don't I don't just have to hear what the person is saying in my head and reply to it as if as if they were actually there. So that was a fun thing for me to play with. But I think the thing that really has allowed me to get behind Shauna is finding that thread. I think it took me a really long time to find that thread of what connects us to each other.
Or you and Shauna?
Yeah, me and Shauna. Because if I don't have something that I feel like I can relate to, it's really hard for me to get behind it. And at first, when I found out that I was going to be playing Shauna, to be honest, I was like, what? Why? I'm so not, no. And it took quite a while to build that believability for myself, but then also to kind of start to pull her apart and not just look at what she is textually, because Shauna is not somebody that has a ton of information thrown out about her in the script, and so there was a lot of imagination that I did on my own. Okay. There are brief mentions of my life and all these things that are never brought up again, but I wanted to explore how my character would change if I made them up for myself. So, for example, there's one line about my ex-husband. I went back and I journaled about who my ex-husband is to me and the way that we got to be together and why we broke up. Yeah, all of it. Same with my 3 kids. I can tell you about my 3 kids. I journaled about them. I journaled about the way that John and I met and how that relationship evolved over the 10 years that I've known him. And throughout that, I think I started to find all of these things in Shauna that make her like me.
I like that.
That's the work beyond the text, the work that not
Not
necessarily will all get seen, but the work that makes you as an actress believe that character in yourself.
Yeah. Because it's not always going to be laid out in
oh, this is me. I can slide right into that. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
That's the work. I like it. How about you, Brian?
Right.
First of all, who are you? And tell us a little bit about you.
So I play Samuel Freed, who is a New York Times reporter who comes to the prison to interview John. And, through these interviews, they kind of delve into deeper topics of, morality, of empathy, that sort of thing. So, I don't know, going into it, it was pretty interesting taking on Sam, because he's a very self-serious character. And all, these past roles I've done are just very, comedic, not very serious. Even Anonymous, I feel was
Well, he's
mostly...
the kid.
Brian was
yeah,
the
he's a
lead,
kid.
for anyone that
I was
doesn't know.
the lead for Anonymous.
Needs to tell you that real quick.
Yeah, but he's very self-serious. And what was interesting for me was, I feel like at first I thought it would be easy to connect to Sam because he holds a lot of the same political views. He's, in a way, the lens for the audience. He's the eye of the audience. He's, very little sympathy for someone like Bobby, who's a neo-Nazi. He holds that kind of view. But at the same time, if I had to pick a villain for this play, I would say
An
Sam
antagonist.
Sam is the antagonist, which is very interesting.
I could agree to that.
Yeah, he holds the same views as what the audience would coming in, but at the same time, he has these little moments where you just kind of like,
Precious moments.
yeah.
Well, that brings up an interesting point because protagonist doesn't necessarily mean good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Protagonist
Sure.
is usually just the character or group of characters that the story empathizes with, I feel like.
Mhm.
And
Drives the action.
yeah,
Quote C.J. Keith.
yeah.
Protagonist drives the action of the story.
Protagonist drives the action of the story, and the antagonist is usually in conflict with the
mhm.
protagonist. And so it's interesting that the audience would identify with your character, and then you be the antagonist. So
Yeah.
it kind of brings up a moral debate with the audience, and almost invites them in. Not quite. It sounds like, since it's I don't know. I will see.
You will
I
see.
will see.
Yeah.
But it sounds very exciting.
But that's very true. The protagonist, at least in this case, are the two people that are on stage the most are murderers. They're on death row.
Yeah.
They're not good guys by any
No.
stretch of the
Yeah.
word.
Except for Shauna, who never leaves the stage once.
And
Yeah.
very true. But yeah, it's a very great point to bring up, and I think that Samuel Freed's character does provide that foothold for the audience to say, this guy believes everything I believe, but why am I sympathizing with these other two murderers?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what makes the show so interesting is because our job is to get the audience to really buy into this world of John Brennan and Bobby being the good guys in the story.
Well, I think
To some respect, I wouldn't say
Some.
they're good guys.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Meh,
I think personally, each
You guys know what I
person
mean.
in
Yeah.
each person in their mind and each character that you ever read thinks they are the good guy, like in some way.
Yeah.
Like they might be doing a terrible thing, but it's for a greater good, or maybe it's a necessary evil in the moment. I'm always fascinated with that, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what this explores in this play.
Yeah.
So now onto you,
I'll be brief. John Brennan. He's on death row next to Bobby. He has been put there and hasn't really accepted the terms of his incarceration. Also, has been writing this newspaper for, assumingly, as long as he's been in there. And John's dilemma is dealing with Bobby. How does John make Bobby come off in his paper and his obituary as someone that he wants his readers to feel bad for? Because ultimately that's John's goal with the paper, is to shine the most positive light on the men in here that he can. And he's not going to stop until every death has its justice and its due cause in his eyes. John's been very fun to learn how to play. I've had to do a lot of things that I've never done for a role. I think we all have for all
Yeah,
our
the character
characters.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
The character
yeah.
work has been very, very helpful. And
Character work in what way? Is it like
Jayani's been having us doing lots of different things.
A lot
journal-
to
the
do with
journal?
physicality.
A lot of
And
physicality.
One of the more memorable things is she sat and interviewed us as our character, which is
I
it's,
love that.
It's
I
something
love
that
that.
like I've done before, definitely, but it was really interesting, and just interesting is a word for it, especially for like our characters, just because they're fully fleshed out people, and I mean, at least in the case of mine, me interviewing with a black woman is not exactly Bobby's ideal interview, and she knew that, and she exploited it, and it just came for like a very,
Got real.
it really got real.
Did
Yeah.
it force you to go to things you wouldn't have
As an actor.
comfort-
As
Eric.
as Eric, absolutely.
Well, yes, but I like we all have that emotion or that type of person it's really like it's like I can go there, but it takes me like a year and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I guess did that launch you a little bit farther than you would have if you had been doing a bunch of other exercises on your own? You feel like?
I think so, just because personally I believe that you can work on yourself as an actor by yourself for as long as you want, but just working with another person helps so much more than just, because that's what acting is. It's not just sitting on a stage by yourself.
It's performing for an audience.
It's performing for an audience, and it's interacting with the audience in one way or another. And so you can have everything going on in your head, but if you can't translate that to real life, then it's kind of pointless.
True.
Cool.
How did you guys think of the character? Because I know it was a lot of very intense emotional work, and going into it, I think me personally was a little hesitant, didn't really know where it was going to lead, but ultimately led to something very helpful. What were your guys' thoughts, Marissa and Brian?
The one that really stood out to me was the exercise we did where people were holding us back while we did our lines.
That was
Yes,
fun.
yes.
And we were going at each other, especially since basically that's what's happening through the text. We're sitting and having an interview, but really like a lot of the subtext of the interview is I hate you. I disagree with you, and
Explicit word.
Explicit
word. You.
Yeah. So that one was super helpful for me.
Yeah.
Did you find that one?
Oh yeah.
Super helpful.
Oh yeah. It was frightening at times how
It was.
we were almost throwing punches at that point.
That day, I'm pretty sure I literally wanted to fight you.
It was good though. It was very
yeah.
very useful work, I think, for both of our characters. And Marissa, I know that you went through some stuff with Shauna doing all this character work.
Yeah.
Any deep discoveries made? Any emotional insights?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, you guys know how much I struggled with Shauna. I mean, anyone who knows me knows that I'm super short and little, and so the idea of me being a tough prison guard is hard to, like, get behind. But, there was one day of exercises. It was actually the day that you guys did the fighting thing. I was the one who was holding back Brian.
Yeah.
And something about that day, like, it wasn't necessarily how successful I was, but it was that I found this, like, fight in me that I didn't realize that was there.
Yeah.
And then another thing is that I kept questioning, like, I don't know if I believe it or if anybody else is. And Jayani said something, and this is just good directing, and she said, it's not about you being, like, strong, it's about you being effective, and you're a person who's effective and capable at their job. And so it doesn't matter how tall you are or what you look like, you're just good at your job. And that, like, something about that allowed me to, like, make the switch, and that was when I really started feeling like I had all these threads connecting together. And so, like, and then the exercise where I was holding Brian back and they were fighting each other, like, I was like, I feel powerful even though I'm, like, struggling so hard. And it just, from there, like, all those exercises meant so much more. And then we also did, like, the different psychological gestures of, like, the pushing and the pulling.
Yeah.
The ripping and the
Yeah.
amazing.
yeah.
And, yeah, and...
Which one did you find you were gravitating towards?
Oh, I was tearing. I, like...
Interesting.
I would, yeah, well, a big thing that I was having trouble accessing was not so much, like, Shauna's anger. I can find the, like, fake anger very easily, but, like, finding the anger, the real anger, and then the hurt that lives beneath it, and being able to, like, access those both at the same time was very difficult. And so one day that we were doing the psychological gestures, I focused on just tearing my heart in half. And just tearing and tearing. And I got to the point where I was so frustrated and so upset. And I was, like, right on the edge of tears. But then I never allowed myself to have, like, the actual tears because nobody's allowed to cry in this show. It says it in the very first page.
The
like,
author's notes.
stage directions.
Yeah.
No crying. And so...
Play against the text.
Yeah. And so... It was like, how do I just get through that and then use it? And I think all of the exercises really were effective.
That's what I love, is that a lot of times, not necessarily in productions that I've worked with Jayani, but, like, a lot of times she seems to have a really good understanding of all the little things we pick up in acting classes, because a lot of stuff you guys were talking about, like the holding back exercise, we did that in clowning, and we did that in Peru.
Yeah.
And then like the psychological gestures as well. We did a little bit in Peru. I don't know, that's Meisner, I believe. Meisner.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Fact check us.
Sure, Meisner.
No, I believe it's Meisner because
All
I
right, it's
remember
Meisner.
Wilfred was this one talking about it.
Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
And she does a good job with, because sometimes I feel we learn these exercises in a classroom setting and we don't really find the use until we put them into our actual work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jayoni's done a great job at really bringing the little exercises, the little warm-ups, and really using them with a purpose. And each one has a purpose, a specific goal for our character, for us as actors to get to through these exercises.
Do you guys think any of you will use any of these? Like, it's
Oh,
already
yeah.
totally.
I would be hard
Totally.
pressed not to use some
Yeah,
of these
yeah.
now that I've seen them and how well they work.
Sound of birds taken up.
Not even just for me, but just that exercise where you two were holding each other back, John and Sam. Just that one scene where they're like at each other's throats, even with Shauna, like after that one exercise, I could visibly see, as just because I'm not in the
Difference.
scene, I'm watching. I can see such a difference. Like, it wasn't bad before, but it wasn't what it is now, like by any means. It's
So I take it's a very visceral scene now.
I have to.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not
It's
supposed to
very
be.
subtle.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be watching. I'm supposed to be in a jail cell a far away. But I genuinely have to focus very hard not to just, because my instinct is just look at you guys because you guys have a very good dynamic. Oh, I know.
All right, let's move on. So, that was kind of a little extension on processes and like techniques for getting into characters. So, like, this is a little bit of an extension on that. When you don't have life or
This is
life
what we
experience
discussed
or
this.
material like
Yeah.
close to your character, or like for those of you who
Eric,
didn't,
for example.
yeah, for those of you who didn't, Eric, but anybody else chime in. What do you fall back on for a performance? Was it just the exercise that we were talking about earlier, or is there? It's almost in line with my first question, actually, as far as the text, the visceral, the emotional, the technical.
My thing was very much just trying to see the world from Bobby's perspective, just because he has a very limited and a very hard set worldview. And it is so far from my own.
To be clear, very, very far.
Very.
I know
Eric
I-
is the nicest man
Eric,
ever.
there was that one time.
Mason, I appreciate that you're joking, but
I'm joking.
Treading in very thin water here.
I guess like so you repeat that like before you go on stage each time. Is there like something like there's an image you have or like
kind of,
a
yeah.
phrase?
What this is kind of a little bit of an insight as to what I usually do is when I'm off stage, I'm not on stage initially. I come in about like 5-10 minutes into the show. But I actually pray right before the show as Bobby to God, asking, because I have a deceased uncle who was very influential in my life. I pray that I was like, hey God, tell Uncle Hugh that I'm trying to do him right, and I really hope that everything's going okay up there. And really just trying to step into where I'm coming from and why I believe what I believe. Because I can know what Bobby believes, but unless I know why he believes that, it doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah.
For about an hour and 40 minutes, Eric has to believe that, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of
It-
interesting.
It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. First of all, saying the things that he says, and
Sure, of course.
then believing everything that he has to believe, but it's kind of important.
Yeah, very,
Very important.
very important for the show, for Bobby, for the audience is going to need to buy that you, Eric the actor, are this character.
What about you, Dylan?
As far as character,
Like, do
to get into
Was
John's mindset.
Yeah.
I
I
have a moment before the show, before my first line, where I kind of just I settle. I really like I find it's useful to step into the physicality of the character, because John is much older than I am. He's in his 40s, and I think the way to sell that is the movement and my voice, the way he speaks is so specific for him. So I just take the time, sitting at the top of the show, to think about my first monologue and what just happened in my world. Which, come see the show, you'll know what happened. And just putting myself in that mindset, just a lot of mental stuff. I don't know. The voice also helps, talking like John before the show, during warm-ups, and if we're doing any line reading through, just helping to get into that voice, that character. Yeah, that's what I have been doing.
Yeah. And this is a question for everybody. Gianni and Dill Pickle and I, we had talked a little bit about the way she had revealed that Bobby's character may have some mental health issues, and that he's racist. And so I guess, do you guys feel, and like maybe just from the way you're playing it now, is Bobby, was he taught to be racist, or is it more a product of his mental health? Because that was a question that Gianni delved into and gave her opinion, but I want to know what you guys feel about that.
I've given it a great deal of thought.
As Bobby, as
I should. And just playing Bobby, being Bobby, I don't know. Just because a lot of people who have mental illnesses to the degree that Bobby most likely has don't know that they have that mental illness. So, in a short phrase, crazy people don't know that they're crazy. I think a lot of his racist behavior and actions are most definitely learned.
Yeah, sure.
I don't think that makes it necessarily excusable. I don't think that Bobby is such a great guy just because he wasn't born that way. I don't think anybody's born that way at all.
There's proof. Yes, no one is born inherently racist.
Absolutely. And so I don't play the character in the mindset that, I don't know any better because of my mental illness. I think I don't really know anything else besides that. The only person who has ever treated me well in my entire life showed me this lifestyle, and he was the smartest man I ever knew. And if the smartest man I ever knew told me those things, I would believe it as Bobby.
Can I?
Yeah,
of
course. This is open.
So, I 100% think that not only, is it my personal opinion, but I think that textually, the show points to the fact that it's kind of nudging toward a more learned behavior sense of, the reasons why Bobby is the way he is. I mean, there's many references to the events that led Bobby to where he is. I'm trying not to give anything away.
I appreciate it.
And so I think that, because in the script, and it's in and of itself, the script references all of these things that led Bobby to be who he is, and none of those ever are just he's just him. It always speaks to events and other things rather than just character. And so I think that, that after, dealing with and studying the script so carefully, I think that the playwright maybe was nudging us toward a direction of the fact that racism is a learned behavior, not something you are born with, no matter how, many mental things you have going.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the conflict that comes with Sam and maybe what an audience member might think is Sam and people don't talk to people like Bobby, if that makes sense. They don't my character never talks to Bobby or learns how how he talks about his uncle Hugh or anything like that. All he knows is just facts on a paper. So I think a lot of the lack of empathy for my character and for audience members in real life, I think.
What's interesting, because in one of my classes we were talking about this concept of the single story, and how there's a perspective.
I know that class. Yeah.
You're in that class, or you were in that class.
Yes, I was.
And how there's a perspective that is taught.
Yeah.
Necessarily, and how if you don't explore the others, you can't understand the others. I forgot the exact question I was going to ask about that. But I feel like that relates to kind of what you were just talking about.
It definitely does. My character only knows one side of the story. And that's the thing with John is the one who talks to every single character in this show. So he knows like all sides of the story.
So I guess a question for everybody is, do you feel like the ideal moral upstanding person would be like what John is doing and like talking to people, maybe not writing the most positive things, just the positive things about them, but like understanding all these things about them? Or
I think at least in terms of John, he's looking at Bobby through this came up in our character work. The primary view of Bobby from John is, how can I make this insane, racist, just awful person sound good in my writing? How can I undemonize him, so to speak?
Yeah.
And no, I don't. Your question was if
like
what was the question?
is like, okay, is the like ideal morally upright person somebody who explores different perspectives like John seems to be doing from what we have talked about before?
Well, I don't know that John is exploring multiple perspectives. I think he's justifying Bobby's. I think the topic of racism coming from learned experience or from a mental health. I think John is justifying Bobby's actions and what led him into being incarcerated with his mental health. He's not really. I wouldn't say John's the most morally upstanding person.
So he's not learning as much as saying who these people are and trying to justify what they are and that being good.
He's making his decisions on knowing Bobby. He's the only character who really takes the time to learn about Bobby and about his past and about what he's been through. Whereas Samuel, like Brian said, was just looking at the facts on a sheet of paper and making his decision based on that. And I think any morally upstanding person, it's difficult because you see Bobby as this monster who's done so many bad things and has all these horrible views, but like we were talking with Gianni, he's still a person, and at what point does the humanity become lost and the actions define the person rather than the person being a person? So,
well, we will find out that and more. Me tomorrow, but the rest of you Friday and Saturday at 7 p.m. at San Diego State University's Experimental Theater, and it is free admission. And there's also a Sunday performance at 2 p.m.
Free admission.
Suggested
$5
suggested donation.
Yes, because everything goes back to school in Dagger, and they're able to put on more interesting shows like this that make us think, make us grow as actors. And I, for one, am excited to add to my deposit box.
And I'm very thankful that all of us were able to come on and talk about the show.
Yes,
Thank you for having us
so much. Come out and see it. It's a great time. I guess that depends on your definition of a great time.
That is a word for it.
Are we closing the vault, Mason? Is that what we're doing here?
Yes. You don't hear it?
Oh, there it is. That's the vault being closed for this installment. I am Dylan Dill Pickle Hoban.
And I'm Mason Banks.
Thank you so much.